Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. I finished my last video with a question. If the damsel in distress convention is loved by men and women, what are we to make of films such as Alita Battle Angel, Wonder Woman, and anime series filled with women who are equal, if not better, than men at fighting? Because these are popular with both men and women. After discussing this very issue at length with a friend, I think I've come to an answer, which is so simple it almost isn't satisfying. Broadly speaking, men like two things: attractive women and action. Combine the two and you have something which men will want to watch. Now, Alita looks a bit creepy due to her eyes in the film, but an individual I was following on Twitter reshared tweets of art with her. It was all fan art, and Alita had been somewhat sexualized in those pictures, so some men, at least, find her physically appealing. As well, Gal Gadot, the actress who plays Wonder Woman, is attractive, and although I haven't watched Wonder Woman, I need to point out her outfit in that film. For someone who is supposed to be an action heroine, she is exposing a lot of her skin to the fire of combat. Funnily enough, I've read an argument somewhere which posited that the female warrior, or the badass chick, is not a woman's fantasy, but instead a man's fantasy. The arguer's idea was that men have an easier time relating to and feeling attraction towards a woman who has manly interests and is physically beautiful. I disagree almost wholeheartedly with this argument, and I say almost wholeheartedly because I think there may be a grain of truth in it, and that is why I'm mentioning it now. There isn't any great reason to go into further detail for this explanation, but why would women like these action heroines? Well, the explanation is again simple and not very interesting, I must confess. In the current year, sex differences between men and women are being not so much denied, but ignored by some people. There is a go-girl zeitgeist in Western societies at the moment. An attitude of, if men can do it, women can do it, and better too. Because of this go-girl zeitgeist, women have been encouraged to entertain masculine fantasies, and to shun femininity, and instead desire masculinity. Women who reject these fantasies, and instead desire to be feminine, are not presented with respect in most fiction, and are sometimes not respected in wider society either. I have spoken with a stay-at-home mother, who told me she has been advised by other mothers to put her sons in a nursery and go into employment. She told me that she wasn't respected a great deal by those particular women, because she refused to take their advice. Female characters, such as Alita and Wonder Woman, are women who are partaking in masculine activities and adopting male gender roles, and so are appealing to women who have been told that they should want to be men. Also, as an additional note, skill and talent are always impressive, no matter the gender. So a character who is great at fighting will be enjoyed by audience members regardless of whether said character is male or female, especially when the audience is given reasons to care for the character and root for him or her. So now that the question has been given an answer, what is the rest of this video going to be about? Well, it is in relation to a comment made under my previous video. I said in my last video, let's imagine an action novel has been written wherein the main hero is beaten by the love interest in a fight. Not once, not twice, but thrice. Does this sound like a novel which would garner a large male readership, spawn a saga, and sell millions of copies? Of course not. Men wouldn't enjoy it for the very reason that the hero, with whom they are supposed to identify, is beaten by a woman several times. Now, a friendly commenter called Viorp left this comment. Intrigued, I decided to watch this anime to investigate this exception. Is it wrong to try and pick up girls in a dungeon is a typical anime in many ways. Dior referred to how the main character, Belle Cranel, was beaten up a couple of times by the love interest, and what he is referencing is 2 episodes where a female character, I.S. Wallenstein, who saved him from death in the first episode and again in a later episode, offers to train the protagonist to fight better. Somehow, despite standing upright like a stick, despite not possessing a muscular technique, and despite not adopting appropriate fighting stances, she wipes the floor with him. Since it is a fantasy anime, I'm guessing magic is responsible. So it would appear to be an exception to the statement I made in my previous video. because anime in the Western world is primarily watched and enjoyed by boys and men. While more women and girls in the West are watching anime, anime consumers tend to be male rather than female. I'm sure it is somewhat different in Japan. But in Great Britain, everything I've seen and read convinces me that the fans are mostly male. Although again, I think this is changing slightly. Anyhow, while watching this anime, I realised something. Anime is a massive exception to many rules which seem obvious and unbreakable when writing fiction which is supposed to appeal to men. Allow me to explain. Imagine you have been made aware of a new live-action fantasy film series aimed at men, which stars a male protagonist who slays monsters and fights villains with steel and magic. From this description, what kind of man do you picture this protagonist being like? Perhaps someone like Aragorn from The Lord of the Rings, or if you read pulp fiction, someone like Conan the Barbarian, or if you are into mythology and the classics, maybe someone like Beowulf or Odysseus. You probably imagined a muscular and fit man who is confident, brave, tough, intelligent, cunning, and admirable. A noble warrior. Or perhaps an anti-hero if you are into a darker type of tale. Either way, a skilled fighter, a man among men. You likely didn't picture a teenage boy with little muscle mass, who is unconfident, uncomfortable around women, kind of dumb, frightened by sex and the opposite sex, socially inept, and as uninspiring and unadmirable as a guy could be. However, my description here describes a number of anime male protagonists, a type of anime protagonist which I'm going to call the weak anime male. We shall use Is It Wrong to Try and Pick Up Girls in a Dungeon to examine the weak anime male, because I believe Belle is a perfect specimen. Before continuing, it is imperative to say that the following defining traits belong on a spectrum. Some weak anime males will not have all the traits to the same degree as others. Some may have some of the features, but not others, and this will be discussed later. Because of this, each weak anime male could be said to be in a different position on the weakness scale. What I am describing is a somewhat broad stock type in anime. With that said, let's continue with Belle Cranel, who has the following qualities in spades. The weak anime male tends to be a teenage boy who is very talented in one skill or set of skills, which often have something to do with violence, but isn't seemingly fit or athletic. He has androgynous facial features and hair, is socially awkward, not very confident in the slightest, is terrible around girls and women, and also rather stupid. This male seems incapable of figuring out that girls and women like him. No matter how obvious the signals are from these women, nothing will connect in his head. If any girls start offering themselves to this male in a clearly sexual manner, he will not respond positively. The first of these defining features we shall consider are the issues concerning girls and women, because in harem anime, or semi-harem anime, the character of the hero, his personality, is often revealed by his interactions with the harem. In fact, by observing any main character's interactions with the opposite sex in any genre, we are allowed a window into his or her personality and learn what archetype they fall. In this series, Belle Cranel lives in the same house as the goddess Hestia, who has given him the blessing, and the permission, to go into the dungeons below the city and fight monsters. Hestia is very much into him. This is obvious to other characters and the audience, yet Belle is apparently oblivious, and as a result does not enter into a romantic relationship with her. Here's the problem. Belle is supposed to be a 14-year-old boy. He is going through puberty. His hormones should be in overdrive, yet when girls and women clearly signal that they would be open for a sexual relationship, he doesn't figure out that they are signaling to him. Nevertheless, Belle isn't quite as bad as Ayato, another weak anime male, in the Asterix War. An anime I haven't watched myself, but one which I've watched criticism of. Anyway, Ayato is hit on by one of the female characters in a rather overt way.
あら、悲しいことを言ってくれますね。アヤトはもう少し私に興味を持ってくれてもいいのではありません？ごめん。まあそれに比べれば、そうそう、お願いというからには報酬も必要ですね。
いや、いいよそんなの。クローディオ。
せっかくですから。この私を望んでくださってもいいのですよ。遠慮なさらずにどうぞ。さあ。
It doesn't get more overt and scandalous than this. Ayato, like Belle, is a teenage boy who should possess overcharged hormones, and yet he doesn't react the way a normal teenager would in this situation. Instead, he runs out of the building. There is a similar, but not directly comparable moment in Is It Wrong to Try and Pick Up Girls in a Dungeon?, where Belle wakes up and realises Hestia is sleeping directly on top of him. He reacts with terror and gets out of the situation as quickly as possible. I'm not endorsing premarital sex, and I'm all for running away from sin, especially in areas of intense temptation. But I must point out that it is never suggested in either anime that these two young teenage boys, who must have raging hormones, ever ran away out of a desire to honour God's commands. De lo contrario, the only reason for their flight is fear. Fear of sex, fear of women, and fear of intimacy. Due to this, it is difficult to admire the teenage boys in these anime series because they are not avoiding premarital sex due to a moral code, but instead because of their own insecurity and fear. As well, these characters never wrestle with their fear of sex. Ayato doesn't beat himself up for running away from an easy act of fornication, and Belle never has a conversation with himself about how he has to either accept or reject Hestia's advances. If they did, both characters would have moments of actual character development and growth. Allow me to propose an observation I've had from being an audience member. Audience members will admire a character's continued abstinence from or rejection of any number of activities, if said character refuses to engage with the activity/activities out of principle. However, audience members will not admire a character's continual abstinence from or rejection of any number of activities if said character's refusal is motivated by fear or timidity. At best, rejection motivated by fear can be played for comedy or used to showcase a flaw which the character must overcome. Weak anime males are also incapable of dealing with more subtle and yet apparent signals of romantic interest. In no particular order, Hestia, already mentioned, Saya, a barmaid, Aina, a half-elf, this furry child, and these two girls show romantic interest in him. Yet apparently, Belle has a bag of wet cement for a brain and can't figure out that he is water and they are thirsty. Because he doesn't realise this, he never turns any of them down, never asks if they like him, and never chooses to enter a romantic relationship with any of them. Consider this obvious example. Aina is Belle's guild advisor, and one day she tells him to meet her in the town square. This is supposed to be a professional outing. This is her professional attire. This is her attire when meeting Belle in the episode. Despite the fact she is not dressed professionally and considers him in a manner more friendly than usual, Belle never suspects a thing and just acts awkward and surprised. He never asks her if she has feelings for him or what her dress was about on that day, or what this was about. There is never a scene where he considers his numerous options. Like Kirito, Belle has tunnel vision for one girl and can't see the other women fawning over him, and yet he never confesses his feelings to the girl he wants. He never asks her out, he never flirts with her, he does nothing to hint of his feelings towards her while in her presence. Instead, when she shows up in the guild to talk to him, he tries running away, and when he finally overcomes his fear of talking to her, he doesn't act with any confidence. In other interactions which are not romantic or sexual in nature, he reacts poorly. He always comes across as unconfident, weak-willed, and socially unaware. It's as if every other social interaction confuses him, and he doesn't know what to say in the situation. Finally, Belle's appearance is rather unimpressive. To be fair, there is not a lot a 14-year-old boy can do to change this. He could put on some more muscle, but that won't make him taller or his shoulders broader. Belle is going to have to wait till he gets older, and turns into a fully grown adult. Having said that, I've seen teenagers his age competing in amateur martial art competitions, and while I've never seen a young teenage competitor who was bulked out, I've seen a number of lean ones. Looking at Belle's physique, you would be forgiven for thinking he's an average teenager who spends most of his time playing computer games. If this anime were taking place in real life and had no action, that would make sense. But it makes no sense when you consider that Belle slays monsters for fun, including a giant gorilla. At this point, I must state that the weak anime male nearly always has redeeming qualities. Belle's ones are kindness, determination, superb fighting skill, and an aura which draws members of the opposite sex to him. The last two might make little sense in the case of Belle and almost every other weak anime male, but they do help make up for the pervasive flaws. Take away these two things, and there is almost nothing to like about Belle or the weak anime males which appear in other anime series. Now, I've talked about the weak anime male at length, and I have two questions for the gentlemen in my audience. Who would you rather be compared to, Belle or Aragorn? Or if you could choose to be more like someone, would you choose to be more like Kirito from Sword Art Online, or Spike from Cowboy Bebop? These two questions are no-brainers for men, and yet anime series, which are aimed primarily at boys and men, often have weak anime males for main characters. Now it is time to try answering the question why. The first reason is relatability. I mentioned in one of my previous videos that characters such as King Leonidas in 300 are inspirational to men, and might be aspirational models as well. Such characters can both be aspirational as well as relatable, but I would argue that these characters tend to be more aspirational than relatable. Most men are not like King Leonidas, the rest of 300, or like similar characters, such as Beowulf and Indiana Jones. Some men might be willing to put in the effort at the gym or the dojo or in various self-improvement activities to be more like these super masculine men, but most men are not willing or able to invest the time. Because of this, some men don't enjoy films like 300 because such works of art can act as a judge or as an ideal standard which they should be trying to reach. If an artist or writer isn't going to try creating super masculine fiction to appeal to men and boys, they can choose the option of making a relatable male character. An excellent example of this is Luke Skywalker in A New Hope. In the first film, he is inexperienced, bored and kind of dopey. He does have great flying skills, an affinity with the Force and an admirable spirit, but he isn't very inspiring. By the end of the trilogy, he has grown into a greater man, and watching Luke in The Return of the Jedi, you can barely remember what he was like in A New Hope. Because of his mundane nature in A New Hope, the audience can understand him easily, far more easily than they can a more extraordinary character, such as Clint Eastwood's Man with No Name in A Fistful of Dollars. The weak anime male is similar to Luke Skywalker in quite a few ways, except for two. First, Luke Skywalker is nowhere near as socially awkward as the average weak anime male. Second, as mentioned before, Luke Skywalker develops and grows, not just in power levels, but also in maturity and character. In this way, Luke Skywalker is an inspirational character for boys and men. He grows from a bored farm boy to a mighty Jedi Knight. He is both relatable and inspirational, although he starts as the former rather than the latter. On the other hand, the weak anime male often grows in power levels like Belle, or acquires a unique skill or item, which puts him above the rest of his competition, like Kirito. However, the weak anime male doesn't tend to mature or develop into a more rounded and aspirational character, such as Luke Skywalker. He tends to remain the same on a personality level. Notwithstanding these details, the same appeal is being utilised. The weak anime male is relatable because there are a lot of boys and men who are not good at socialising, not good around women, not especially respected, and not physically impressive. A character such as Belle faces their problems and reacts similarly. Hence, he is an easy character to understand and relate to. The second reason for the prolific appearance of the weak anime male is fantasy. Socially awkward and inexperienced individuals of both sexes do not tend to do well in the romance department. In romance literature, it is common to see the shy and unconfident girl attract a great man, and in anime series, it is common to see the socially awkward and uncomfortable guy get attraction from many women. Belle gets the attention of quite a few girls, and even one woman, well, half-elf. Likewise, most boys and men are not great fighters and not highly respected by society. At the start of the series, Belle isn't a great fighter, and isn't very respected, but he becomes a great fighter, and becomes more respected as time goes on. Some characters still dislike him, but that is to be expected in both real life and anime. While almost every boy and man you'll meet wouldn't want to be as socially awkward as Belle, most would desire to have his power and his aura of attraction. I can hear a number of questions rising among members of the audience. Your Imperial Majesty, if Belle is supposed to be a fantasy for men and boys, Why doesn't he sleep with at least one of the girls who is attracted to him? Why isn't he more confident? Why isn't he debonair? Why is he so awkward? If he is supposed to be a fantasy, why doesn't he act a bit more like James Bond, who is also a male fantasy? I have been asking these questions myself, because it is this which makes the weak anime male a wonderful enigma and interesting character type. The weak anime male is a blend of mundane relatability and empowering fantasy. An unusual cocktail, to be sure. It makes sense not to make a fully relatable character, or a completely normal character, because such a character could come across as boring and wouldn't be admirable in any way. But why wouldn't you make the weak anime male a complete fantasy in the vein of the other male characters I've mentioned already? I have a theory on this. I've noticed among some men a strange unspoken reservation against other men taking up martial arts. Some men become uncomfortable when another man says he is practicing a martial art. I know some men who are into martial arts, and one of these men told me that before he took up his particular martial art, he didn't think much of people who learned how to fight. He said he thought they were brutish and unintelligent, but he told me these thoughts were rationalizations on his part. He didn't want to learn how to fight because he knew it would take effort, but he recognized that the men who were learning how to fight were more masculine than him, and so he had to rationalize to himself why he was a bigger man than them. Similar reactions can happen with works of art. I've already said that some men don't like films similar to 300, because such media can act as an ideal standard for which they should try to reach. And such men know just how far they are from the standard, and how much work they would have to put in to change. A lot of men don't want to deal with their insecurities by trying to improve themselves, or facing their fears head on. So understandably, they try to justify their reasons for not doing so. The common way is to disregard the idealized masculinity they see in these films as unrealistic, anachronistic, unnecessary, comic, and outright ridiculous. And indeed, these criticisms can be valid depending on the work of media. But sometimes, these criticisms can be attempts to dismiss the idea that the male viewer should try to improve himself for his own benefit. An obvious problem presents itself here. Men like action films and action stories. Thus, they want to enjoy action media. But if a subsection of men doesn't want to watch action media which make them feel bad about themselves, what is there left to enjoy? The answer is action anime with the weak anime male for a protagonist. Weak anime males are not super masculine by definition. They are not cool, not super confident, and while they perform feats which clearly show they are fighting fit, they do not look physically strong. Weak anime males are normally far less confident and far worse around women and girls than the average man and boy. Hence, while many of their pains might be relatable, they cannot be aspirational characters for men and boys. If a boy or man aspires to be more like a fictional character, he certainly won't be aspiring to be more like Belle Cranel. It isn't that Belle doesn't have good qualities, it's that when taken as a holistic whole, he isn't somebody a man would want to be. So as a character, he doesn't cause or pressure male audience members to self-reflect on their own strengths and weaknesses. But because Belle is a powerful and skilled fighter, who is very attractive to girls and women, he can also act as a fantasy and as wish fulfillment. This is the great potential utility of the weak anime male. He can be a character who is both non-critical, of male audience members, that is, highly relatable and fantastical. At this point, it would be neglectful not to mention a variant of the weak anime male, who is not supposed to be a fantasy for men and boys, but instead a relatable character about whom the audience care. A good example of this kind of weak anime male is Yukitaro from Future Diaries. Yukitaro fits the weak anime male criteria in many ways. He is socially awkward, not good around girls and women, not respected by most people, and his only skill is darts. However, the two main differences between him and other weak anime males, such as Belle, are twofold. First, he doesn't have great fighting skills. Yukitaro does get better at killing and fighting as the series progresses, but he doesn't reach Belle's power levels. Second, girls and women are not falling at his feet every second. Only two people are attracted to him, Yuno and Akisi. Putting it lightly, the kid doesn't have good options. Another subsidiary difference between Yukitaro and Belle is there are hints as to why Yukitaro is the way he is. Yukitaro comes from a broken home. His parents split up when he was younger, and being only 14 years old, he is still young, and he rarely sees his father. He is being raised by only one of his parents, his mother. Things like these can cause immense damage to children and teenagers, as any counsellor will tell you. If there are not attempts to try and mend the problems as they appear, children with this kind of upbringing can grow up with emotional and psychological problems. To be fair, Bell did not have an ideal upbringing. He was raised by his grandfather, and his parents are never seen, but unlike Yukitoro, it seems he grew up in a more stable home, and had a father figure in the form of his grandfather. Nevertheless, his upbringing seems to have been better than that of Yukitoro's, yet both act much the same in social situations. Jumping off this tangent, the two main differences described are the reason why Yukitoro is a different breed of weak anime male. He isn't a fantasy or wish fulfillment, he isn't good at fighting, he suffers a lot and isn't especially skilled at anything noteworthy. Women aren't attracted to him en masse, and he is manipulated a great deal throughout the series by various players. He isn't a fantasy for anyone, however it is easy to feel sorry for him, and hope that he makes the right decisions so he doesn't die in the battle royale. At this juncture, I think it may be useful to differentiate between the fantastic weak anime male, an example being Bell Cranel, and the non-fantastic weak anime male, an example being Yukitoro. But to wrap up, ladies and gentlemen, anime is an exception to many accepted rules concerning what kind of art appeals to men and boys. One of the largest of these exceptions is the weak anime male, or as I've chosen to call him now, the fantastic weak anime male. Usually a teenage boy who is unconfident, socially awkward, bad with women, physically unimpressive, and yet great at some skills which earn him respect and praise. This character appeals to some male audience members because he is a relatable fantasy who does not make them self-reflect on their own strengths and weaknesses, or prompt them to consider whether they should try to improve themselves. Thank you all for watching. I hope you all have an excellent day. For the past couple of videos, I have talked about how in some pieces of art made for men, the main protagonist, the hero, is meant to be an aspirational figure, and is supposed to inspire men to be more than what they currently are. But for what purpose? What are these films encouraging men to be, and why? I may have to make a video about this subject in future, but I can offer something of a short answer now. The standards for men promoted in films such as 300, Indiana Jones, the classics, and various westerns inspire men to try and be more like this SWAT officer, and all the other men involved in the rescue operations in the wake of Hurricane Harvey.